Hello and welcome to this week's review on My Hero Academia. This week we're looking at Volume 3 of Vigilantes. It's time for a volume review! Woohoo! You know the rules and so do I. Let me know what you thought about this particular volume in the comment section down below. Whilst you're there, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today. It will do them a power of good. Now on to the review itself. Now, I will admit that what I'm about to say might sound a little bit weird, but these are my opinions, these are my thoughts, these are my feelings on it. I have to say that Volume 3 is probably the most unashamedly weird volume thus far, which I will admit sounds like damning with faint praise, but this is a volume where we're introduced to a new hero who's wrapped up in a sex scandal and has to be rebranded like a men's deodorant brand. We have a current big bad villain who injected a kitten with a drug to turn them into a bus to kidnap people, and one of our big name heroes from the main series in the previous episode fought a guy whose power was cows. And the episode before that, we got a solution to a suicide bombing plan where the solution was boobs. Now, I will admit, I'm perfectly fine with all of that. Yeah, the boob thing is take it or leave it, but still, the sheer brazen creativity that we have on the show here in this volume, it's just really wild, and I really do love that. I have to admit, and I will be brutally honest here, that the previous two volumes were starting to get a bit tiring with just how repetitive they were, with episodes just seeming to have the same loop over and over again. We'd have a little bit of a banter with our heroes, then we'd have a villain, potential villain, knocking about, they get jabbed with the instant villain thing, they'd cause a rumpus, our hero save the day, then maybe either an enigmatic shot of B in the background, or our heroes having a little bit more witty banter, and that's it. And that was the case for pretty much a near 5-episode run, and it was getting really tiring. This volume, that's not the case. In almost every single episode, we get something new, fresh, and different. Stuff that's not just fresh and different within this particular series itself, but in comparison to the main series itself. The sheer creativity on the show here, with almost every single episode, is really remarkable, and has a level of just sheer creativity that I really do love. One of the things I really do like about the world of My Hero Academia is just how diverse it is with the powers that you see. Even just in the background shots, you'll just see these really interesting, cool-looking characters who are just there. And I've always wanted to see like how we kind of we integrate that eccentricity of the design of the wider world into a story, and that's what we get in this particular volume. I will admit, and let's be honest here, the pacing of this particular volume wasn't always great, though we have discussed that in the past. With stuff like Crawler's mother, I think that was just done way too quickly. It was just expedited to an extent that it just felt almost like, why bother at all? But you never know, we might get a bit more fallout of that later on, but I'm leaning into the no as far as that's concerned. And as well, I will admit that all this eccentricity, all this weirdness, this just sheer balls-to-the-wall insanity might be a bit beyond the pale for some people. It is rather quirky, all of this, for reasons I've discussed before, far more so than in the previous volumes, and certainly far more eccentric than the main series itself. But for people who are reading this, getting really interested in with the stuff to do with B, the instant villains, the drama which we had with Stain, the Sato or Sabo, whatever his character name is, the little petty gangster guy that we met a few episodes ago, that was all interesting and exciting stuff, but it's been put to one side. And now, for this particular volume, we've got cows, boobs, and frauds. And all of that stuff is fun for what it is, but for anyone who's looking for something a little bit more serious, a little bit more grounded, a little bit more in keeping with the tradition of the main series, we go from dealing with a villain who seemingly has a beehive in her eye to Captain Celebrity and his shenanigans, and for a lot of people that might be a bit much. For me, I'm fine with that for the reasons that I've explained in those previous volumes. I think those are all fun concepts for what they are. There's a part of me that feels this particular volume is supposed to be something of a palette cleanser. As I've mentioned in the main series, there would be those periods within the main series itself where you'd have a few little episodes which some people would consider filler, where the stakes are far lower, it's a little bit sillier, it's a little bit more loose, and then you then pivot into something a lot more darker and serious. You know, you have some big revelation, then you have a little bit of a gap so once you can process all of that of what's happened, then another big serious thing. And this feels like we're getting the little bit of fun, bantery stuff before we get into next volume where stuff's going to be a lot more serious. With that said, I do like the fact that within this volume we do get some decent deep dives into the backstory of some of our characters. Whilst I will be brutally honest, I don't think that the character development of our main cast has really been as extensive as I previously would have liked it to be. I did enjoy what we saw for what it was worth. Crawler's history with his mother and how that ended up boiling out. Popstep and her feelings towards Crawler. And in the previous issue, the stuff that we saw with All Might. I will admit that I do feel that with subjects like those that I've just discussed, or rather highlighted, I think they needed to go a lot more harder on them, to really go deep into them and reveal more information, or to give us a better understanding as to how all this kind of stuff goes. As a whole entity, I feel this volume was lacking in something of a bit of a heavier reveal in that kind of regard. The power boost stuff is fun, it's neat for what it is, even if I did find it a bit too risible at the time that I did it, and might have riffed on it a little bit too hard in the review that I did of that particular episode, but I think that it needed just something in the character department to really just knock it into the next level of it. In the previous volume we got to see how Stendhal became Stain. In the volume before that, we had the introduction with B and the hint of a connection between B and Knuckle Duster. This week, or rather this volume, we don't really get that, and I'll discuss that in a few moments shortly. However, with all that said, if we look at stuff that's a little bit more conventional, so to speak, I do think that the action sequences within this particular volume were all well drawn and well paced. It once again shows just how panel composition is every bit as important to the action sequences themselves as the actual scale of the panels themselves can help to express the speed and pace of a particular sequence of events. I will admit there wasn't any particular action sequences that stood out to me. Whilst there was some great artwork on show here and there was some fun action sequences what there were. Like, for example, I did like the extended action sequence we got over the course of the final 2 real episodes of this volume. There wasn't anything that quite stuck out to me as the stuff that we saw in the previous volume with Stendhal, or in the very early days of Vigilantes itself, in the opening volume, we had some really fantastic action sequences. But don't get it twisted, I'm not knocking the action sequences that we get here. I will be honest, I think they are fantastic for what they are. They just needed something else to really knock them to the next level, which itself, I suppose, then goes back to the idea that this was more of a palette cleanser thing. Like, everything that we get here, I will be honest, not to get into the overview too much too soon, I think is fantastic for what it is. There's some great creativity here, there's some great character moments here, all good stuff, but it doesn't really have that kind of gut punch moment, that aha moment, that shock moment, that awe moment. We do have one towards the proper end of this volume, but it doesn't really go anywhere. Or rather, it seems that it doesn't get a chance to go anywhere, and I don't think it really will, so let us now get into the negatives. I think that this volume, as a whole entity, well, I did love it as its own thing. I loved just how creative it was. I loved the comedy of it for the most part. I loved some of the action sequences within. I think they had some decent character developing moments. I think that at the end of the day, it lacked an edge. The previous volumes rounded off with something that felt more personal. Whilst I don't have issues with the power boost thing that Crawler had, the whole idea of him being outed to his mother and Makoto should have been the big ending moment, but almost as soon as that is introduced, it's brushed aside. It may be reflected upon later, but how it's actually presented in the last real episode of this volume, it really doesn't feel like that is going to end up being the case. I have discussed this in greater detail in my review of the particular episode itself, how it doesn't really feel like it is the kind of big ending that it needs to be. I get that they're probably not going to go down deeper with all of this, but at the same time, this is the big, oh no, how are they going to do with this moment? And it really isn't going to be. At worst, Makoto is going to end up leaning on Crawler for a dissertation, and that's kind of, no, not dissertation, thesis, because she's doing a doctorate, we know that much. And for Crawler's mother, we're probably never going to end up seeing again, and she's not going to end up saying anything about it. You know, we have the ending gag of her saying, well, if he acts out of line, whack him again, which, Well, that's a whole other mess that we got to end up dealing with. But again, I think the volume itself lacked edge. As I mentioned just previously, in the previous volumes, we had something more to really kick things off on round stuff off, stuff that would set into motion things for later on, either within this series or the main series itself. As I said, Volume 1 implies a connection between between Knuckle Duster and B. The previous volume sets up for Stain becoming Stendhal becoming Stain, so that Stain can be a problem in the main series or potentially later on here, depending on how things go and whether or not there's any kind of OVA equivalent episodes as we saw towards the end of this volume. Here, the big setup thing is they know he's a vigilante. Two people that are important to Crawler's life know he's a vigilante. One's just going to use that to get a better grade in a thesis. The other one's going to just ignore it and just think he's just kind of a bit of a disappointment, and that's just about it. Whilst there's a part of me that's glad we're not going to lean too heavily on the character drama stuff, the almost soap opera thing of, oh, my son's a vigilante. Oh, well, I never. Oh, you can't be doing this. I'm going to tell your father about this, and oh, it's going to be a rumpus at home. And whilst I'm glad they're not doing that stuff, the same kind of thing. It feels like actively swerving an interesting plot thread for the sake of something else, and maybe in the next volume or two that something else will be worth it. We'll just have to see. I will, on a similar kind of note, the whole thing about Crawler rediscovering that he had a power that was beaten out of him really changed nothing as well. Like, sure, it will be probably gone into in greater detail later on. Not the fact that it was beaten out of him, but the fact that, you know, he's forgot how to use it. But this itself ends up making it feel as though this final episode, the big dramas and big reveals of it were kind of not of much consequence. Again, the whole thing about Crawler being revealed, doesn't matter, shrug it off. Oh, he's discovered this brand new power that's going to help him become a better hero. Oh, he's forgotten about it. Oh, well, shrug it off. Sure, these things may come into greater focus later on, but for the here and now, it just kind of feels as though this volume has kind of ended on something of a big shoulder shrug, which is a bit of a disappointment, because this volume as a whole, I think, is a lot of fun. And I can forgive this volume being lighter and brighter and a little bit more, I don't want to say superfluous or unessential, but I can forgive it for being a little bit more light-hearted ahead of a potentially darker one, which definitely seems to be the case looking for what I've seen in the next volume. But it does, again, it feels as though at the end of the day, after 7 or 8 episodes, we've now boiled down to, oh, they know he's a vigilante, but they don't care, and he got a new superpower, but he doesn't remember it. Setting up for later on, but for the here and now, there hasn't really been any kind of resolution to anything. Like, it's an entire volume of setup without much payoff. Maybe we'll get some more payoff later on, but for the here and now, I'm just left with the memories of the silly and the fun stuff that I saw over the past 3 weeks or so. And just one more criticism before we get into the overview. As I've said time and again, those final 2 episodes, those special episodes, should have been in a previous volume. The actual fact that it says at the start of my volume that this is the 4th revision of this particular volume suggests to me they could have easily done a 5th where they took these episodes out and put those episodes in a previous one. It would have made it a lot better, it would have made it work a lot better and make more sense, but that's a discussion that I've had so many times now, it's too much, and the rest of this negative section has been repetitive enough, so we'll just move on and discuss the overview. At this point, you can kind of guess what I'm going to be saying. I really did love this volume. I think there's a lot going for it. I think that it has a level of creativity and a level of just sheer brazen, stupid confidence I really wish was present in the main series. It is just nuts just how wild this particular volume went. How it starts off and you think, oh, the big thrust of this is just going to be a kind of crappy superhero that's going to turn out to possibly be a secret bastard. Then suddenly cat bus, and think, oh well, the cat bus stuff is done and dusted. Then suddenly cow villain. Think, oh, the cow villain stuff, and then suddenly boobs, and it just escalates in just to weird areas, and I just love that. Just this escalation of stupidity. Granted, the boobs and the cow thing were in OVA episodes, aren't really part of the main narrative, but still, I love just how wild this particular volume went. The only negative, like I say, is the fact that in the end it didn't really conclude anything. And the stuff that it did conclude, it felt as though it was concluded far too quickly. It didn't really set up for anything, and the kind of stuff that it set up for, it immediately concluded almost as soon as it came along. So there you are. That's how that goes, and with all that said and done, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner, and I'll just say here and now that I'm recording this episode far earlier in the week because the rest of the week for me is going to be rather busy. So if there's been any other comments between the time I've recorded this and the time that it goes out, there'll be a very awkward edit at some kind of point, but, you know, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Our first comment comes from Sergeant Gunnery, who I know from a different name, who says, "Good video, man!" And I say thank you for liking the video. Next comes Big X1, who says, 1542, that's the timestamp thing. This is what I wanted to say in my comment, but I didn't think I messed it up. I think I like this one for the most part, but I think it needed something more. Not sure what this was, referring to the previous issue, the previous adventure, the previous episode. That's the word I was looking for, where we had All Might having his big meeting with the detective. And I think it's fair to say that I probably enjoyed it a bit more than Big X1, but then I'm this kind of weird person that likes these scenes where they're having meetings with these kind of worlds, so I was fine with it. I did enjoy it quite a lot. I did enjoy the almost tragic bent that we got with All Might, but I know that might not be enough for some people. I think that he may have needed something else, but I'm not quite sure. I'd have to go back and read it. Next up, we have a comment from Lester Williams Jr., who says, question, has there been any news about this story getting anime adaptations? I would prefer this to be adapted than the OVAs that we have now. Thank you for your comment, and apologies for bungling the pronunciation of the comment itself, but there hasn't really been any news of anything to do with Vigilantes getting an anime adaptation. The rumours surrounding it have got a little bit more fevered over the past few weeks and months, though from the investigating that I have done into it, the main source that all the articles we talk about is just some random YouTube channel who just has the vague insider info stuff. Maybe they do have insider info that says that Vigilantes is going to get an adaptation. However, I'm skeptical of it because anyone anywhere could say that they have insider information of it. And the rumours about Vigilantes getting an anime has been discussed almost as soon as it started to go out. I think that part of that just might be somewhat lost in translation because Vigilantes has had some animated bits and pieces here to act as trailers for certain story arcs, so it might have just been something that has gone down the lines. As a whole, I don't know if there's going to be an adaptation of this. Some people that I know that are more into anime aren't that sure that it will do because it's rare for a spin-off of a series to get an animation. And most of the shows I've seen that have been spin-offs of it don't last that long, but we'll see about it. The big rumour at the moment, if you want to believe it, is that there will be a new season of Vigilantes that will kick off a year after the main series is concluded. So that might be 2025, 2026, depending on how long it takes them to wrap up everything. I don't know if that's the case, but as I've said in the past, I think it would be wise for them to adapt to Vigilantes, because otherwise it feels like just leaving money on the table, and let's face it, we have to have more money. And last but no means least in this particular batch of comments, we have Taken Name, who says, start of a great partnership between All Might and Takushi. Thank you for your comment, and I think that is a great partnership. I think it's one of those partnerships I'd wish that we'd see more of in the main series, because I think the detective character is one that, when they were first introduced, it felt as though they were going to maybe a major inclusion in the series, almost like this Commissioner Gordon-esque figure, and then they disappeared until like the final episodes of the previous season. Which is a bit of a shame. I like that angle to it. Again, I'm not advocating for a spin-off where we get to see the police trying to deal with the superheroes, but hey, it might not be a bad idea. But still, with that said, thank you all for your comments. If you want to leave a comment about this particular volume, do so in the comment section down below. I haven't anything else to say. I hope you dislike this volume. Next week we start the next volume. But between then and now, thank you all for listening and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!